Spencer Jaffe, Trump will lose, says Spencer Jaffe with his super chat for $5.
Big shout out.
He'll lose. He's got, I don't know what you're referring to. He has so many ways to lose. You're talking about the election? Or you're talking about the court
Trump
case
Tower.
in New York? You're talking about the court case in Georgia? You're talking about the court case in Florida? You're talking about the J6 case? Which case? Where will he be losing?
The
Melania?
image is hideous.
Yes. Man, if, there's a real possibility that Donald Trump would have to satisfy these monetary obligations in some way that would include bankruptcy. We talked to David K. Johnston yesterday about the Trump bankruptcy as a real possibility. He was the first one to really bring it up as something that it wasn't really out there in the media. But the issue for Donald Trump, even with the advantages that bankruptcy would bring, because as you are aware, if you watched yesterday with David K. Johnston, you can go back, the video's there, and he details all of this. I think the Johnston videos are really instructive, and you can go back. I've tried to release a few of them as 60s, as shorts, but he details how that puts everything on hold. It would be another really effective delay tactic, not to mention it lets you off the hook financially, right? Now, it's not an indefinite hold, and there are all kinds of other details as well. But point being, there are advantages to bankruptcy that Trump might very well want to avail himself of. The problem is, and this gets to the point today, is that as Trump has fewer and fewer options to satisfy this debt, and as he really risks seizure of Trump properties, he also faces a political cliff in his mind, according to insiders, if he were to declare bankruptcy. His image, his brand is one of these brands that's completely imagined. That's something else David K. Johnston has written literally chapter and verse about and has also shared with us. But point is, that brand is desperately valuable to him as a successful businessman. And so the idea that he would have such a public humiliation associated with bankruptcy, he would likely be pilloried by all the people in the world of Democrats and those who just are Trump haters. It would be a really rough ride for him. And that is apparently something that he's very much focused. Pilloried is a ding word. Yes, you're right.
Wouldn't it be, though, isn't it already embarrassing and a loss of his political image for him to not have enough money to pay this debt, to even be talking about bankruptcies? This, by the way, would be the first personal bankruptcy, but Trump has already had 6 corporate bankruptcies in his life, that he's filed for Chapter 11 for his company 6 times. So he's no stranger to the bankruptcy.
No, and he would tell you bankruptcy is a legitimate way to reorganize debt, and it's an option open to many Americans, et cetera. There are a lot of spins on bankruptcy. But it would delay for a long time the requirement that he pay the judgment. But, and this is a judgment that's growing at $100,000 a day, and it's a $500 million right now, almost $500 million. So the idea, though, that he would declare bankruptcy, according to insiders, is one that he doesn't like because of the damage it would do to him politically. The plan is to continue fighting in court, according to a Trump spokesperson. And they are even asking in court for a waiver of the bond requirement, and the appeals panel has yet to rule on that. We talked about that here. When we were talking about appeals, I mentioned to you before, I was talking with Kim, that there are 2 different kinds of appeals going on. One of them is to actually waive the need for the bond. Mm-hmm. Anyway, we'll talk to David Katz about this, but the idea somehow that Trump would declare bankruptcy seems to be one that he isn't warm to for reasons that have to do with politics, not for reasons that have to do with the practical considerations, because the practical considerations really point to bankruptcy. They allow you to essentially no longer be obligated to satisfy that bond. You could delay it again, it's a finite period, but it could be delayed literally for years. So the idea somehow that that wouldn't let you off the hook is flawed. But the idea that that would be okay politically is also flawed. Politically, there'd be a huge price to pay, and that is Trump's worry. Newsweek has a headline that says Donald Trump's running out of time to sell Mar-a-Lago.
I have the question, where's the money? Hasn't he been telling us he's loaded? Hasn't he been bragging about all of his gabillion dollars? Where's the money?
I wanted to speak to that because somebody in comments after hours trading, there are comments, right? When we go off the air, most people watch our show or take in our show after we go off the air, and I read the comments and try to respond, or I note them so that I can respond here on the show. And so it's in that latter category, responding on the show and noting it, that this falls, this question. And I asked it of David K. Johnston yesterday, or was it to Tuesday when David comes through, but it wasn't sufficiently answered for one of the people who was commenting again. So I saw this comment. How is it that Trump can claim that he has all of this money? I mean, sort of to what Kim's saying, that you have $800 million in cash, and I got that much on me, no problem, Your Honor. Are you kidding me? Go ahead, you can hit me all day. I'm rich, I'm a billionaire. He claimed to have $10 billion, but in court, he claimed to have close to $1 billion available from what I was seeing. And when it turns out that his lawyers then show up to that same court and they say, oh, actually, we miscounted, we don't have the money's tied up, whatever. How is that not perjury?
Right.
I mean, Trump has said he has the money available. Now he's saying, I don't have that money available. So what was that testimony before? That was a lie or a misrepresentation. That would be perjury. So I asked, well, because I wanted to follow up on this very same question, I asked with David, and I asked the other David Katz, who will be joining us in the second hour. How come that's not perjury, and how come that's not brought up as perjurable in some way, as actionable, right? That perjury is actionable. And David simply said, Mark, it's a calculation that prosecutors do. Like, is it worth it to bring a fifth charge against him? They just view it as not worth it. So that's really the answer is, yes, you're right in the chat. Those of you who said, hey, isn't he guilty of perjury here? Yeah, probably. I mean, he'd explain or wiggle or whatever, but you could probably nail him on it. But it's sort of like, why? To what end?
Yeah.
So that's really how he skates on that. Perjurable is a ding if it's a word. I'll ding it for now, but you're right. So the idea that Trump would declare bankruptcy again looks to be one that he can't get his arms around, but he also can't get his arms around selling his properties, and something's going to have to happen. He could try offloading some hotels, golf courses for cash, but he's got to do it in a hurry. And those things take a long time. David K. Johnston, again, I released a short with him talking about that, in response to one of your questions. Why doesn't he just sell something? Yep. You just can't sell stuff that quickly, which is another reason that lenders don't want to step up and take any situation with Trump where he needs money, in this case, almost $500 million, that's collateralized by property. As I told you the other day, real estate is not what they want. That will be an insane encumbrance. They don't want illiquid assets to collateralize a loan. They want securities, bonds, etc. So Russia and the Saudis need to figure out how to launder their Trump bailouts. Yeah. It really does point to outside influence of some kind, and we will see. Donald Trump's running out of time to sell Mar-a-Lago. There is the headline in Newsweek. So that's the latest on Trump and a little on the bankruptcy. But as I say, we'll have more. David Katz, the esteemed legal analyst and the former federal prosecutor, joins us in the second hour, and we'll follow up on that and more questions when it comes to the law. But
The Mark Thompson Show.
I will tell you that speaking of the law, you know, the Federalist Society is the conservative group. It's largely now run by Leonard Leo, who just got all of this money poured into it. And he's the guy who comes up with that list of Supreme Court nominees, potential list, and also federal judiciary is all populated with the Federalist Society under a GOP administration. So apparently the potential for a second Trump administration has brought Leonard Leo, who runs this Federalist Society, and the Koch network money together. And they are planning, and this is something that did not happen during the first Trump administration, they are planning for all the administrative aspects of a second Trump administration. Remember, during the first Trump administration, they didn't even think they'd win. Trump was really just trying to build his brand. I mean, that was advertised almost by people who had worked for him and were part of that campaign. They didn't have transition people in place. They didn't have anything in place. You had, if you read Michael Lewis's book, The Fifth Risk, he details this, and it's wild, and you almost just can't believe it. There were entire floors of government empty because they literally had not planned on staff and transition. And the way it had worked typically is that when one administration leaves, the next administration is essentially transitioned in with a bunch of briefings. There are all kinds of PowerPoint presentations. They're big. You know, in other words, that transition is something that's important. The Trump people had none of that. They had no one there to take the PowerPoint meeting, no one there to receive the materials. The transition materials were orphaned. They were literally thrown away. So that's not going to happen this time. I mean, they're not so worried about the transition. They are talking about staffing with huge groups of people who are essentially built to take office day one, and they're already doing hiring. They got $55 million from groups linked to conservative activist Leonard Leo and the Koch network. And all this funding from influential conservative donor networks is flowing into groups that are trying to get the second Trump administration going from day one. They have that Project 2025. That's that initiative that, again, is advertised to develop intense conservative policies and recommendations. And again, that's from the Heritage Foundation. They put out that entire document. And so now, if President Trump gets into office, if former President Trump becomes the next president, he will hit the ground running so he can play more golf, and people like Leonard Leo and the Koch network people can actually craft conservative policy from day one. I'll post it to my Twitter feed. It's pretty crazy, but Leonard Leo's network and groups around Leonard Leo have funneled over $50.7 million to the groups advising the 2025 project. It's alarming. If you want to see any sort of liberalism survive, it's alarming. If you're cool with a religious right takeover of government, a complete deregulation of consumer protection agencies, of the Environmental Protection Agency, if you are cool with there being no regulation on your water, on your soil, and the amount of toxins that could be dumped in both, the amount and tonnage of toxins that can be discharged into the air, if you're cool with that, you don't really feel that there should be any regulation on that, then you'll love these guys. They're going to dismantle all of those agencies that are involved in consumer protection, environmental protection, regulation on banking. I think it's a scary proposition, and it's a very real one at that. And they have their act together this time. That's the point I wanted to make. So. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.